Elliot Grayson froze in the doorway of his own penthouse as he watched the woman slip her heels back on, the silver dress shimmering in the morning light because those scars across her feet were identical to the photographs locked in his brother's case file 6 hours earlier. The Meridian Charity Gala had been nothing more than another obligation for Elliot. As CEO of Grayson Technologies, he'd built an empire on privacy algorithms and digital security, but tonight he'd been forced into the spotlight. The board insisted his presence was necessary after the company's stock had taken a hit, following recent negative press about their failed partnership with law enforcement. The ballroom at the plaza buzzed with Manhattan's elite tech moguls, philanthropists, socialites draped in designer gowns worth more than most people's annual salaries. Elliot nursed his whiskey at the bar, counting the minutes until he could escape back to his fortress of solitude. When she appeared, she moved differently than the others. Where they networked with calculated smiles, she danced. Where they posed for photographers, she seemed invisible to the cameras. Her silver dress caught the light like moonwater, and she was completely barefoot on the marble floor of one of New York's most exclusive venues. Interesting choice, Elliot found himself saying as he approached her near the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. She turned, and her eyes were the color of storm clouds. What choice? No shoes, no designer bag, no entourage. He gestured toward the crowd. You're not playing the game. A smile tugged at her lips. Maybe I don't know the rules, or maybe you know better ones. They talked for an hour on the rooftop terrace while the party continued below. She introduced herself as Lena, no last name offered, and he didn't press. She spoke about art with the passion of someone who understood suffering, about loneliness, like she'd made peace with it, about dreams in the past tense as if she'd buried them long ago. What do you do? She asked as they watched the city lights blur into constellations. I build walls, he said. It wasn't entirely untrue, and I tear them down. She laughed, but there was something haunted in the sound. When he invited her back to his penthouse, she hesitated for only a moment before nodding. They walked through his marble foyer, past priceless art and floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing Manhattan's glittering skyline. She moved through his space like she belonged there, touching nothing but seeing everything. They sat on his terrace until sunrise, sharing stories carefully edited of their darkest truths. She fell asleep against his shoulder as dawn painted the sky pink and gold, and he found himself studying her face, the elegant bone structure, the small scar near her temple, the way her breathing finally seemed peaceful. When Lena woke, Elliot was already dressed and making coffee in his kitchen. The silver dress pooled around her feet as she padded across the cold marble. And that's when he saw them clearly for the first time. The scars, they weren't random marks. They formed a specific pattern across her insteps and around her ankles, like restraints had been tightened there repeatedly over time. His blood went cold as recognition hit him like a physical blow. Coffee, he managed, his voice carefully. Controlled her, please. She sat at his granite island, seemingly unaware that his world had just tilted off its axis. He handed her a mug with shaking fingers, excused himself to his home office, and immediately accessed the encrypted files he'd inherited after his brother Marcus's death 3 years ago. Marcus had been an investigative journalist obsessed with exposing a human trafficking network, operating through high-end escort services in Manhattan. The case had consumed him, cost him his marriage, and ultimately his life when his car went off the George Washington Bridge on a rainy night in October. The police called it an accident, but Elliot knew better. Marcus had been close to something big, and someone had silenced him for it. The photographs were all there in Marcus's files, dozens of images documenting the specific scarring patterns used by the trafficking ring to mark their victims. Burn marks from cigarettes, cutting patterns, and distinctive restraint scars that matched exactly what he'd just seen on Lena's feet. His hands trembled as he pulled up the missing persons reports Marcus had collected. 23 women had disappeared over a 5-year period, all between the ages of 18 and 30, all from vulnerable backgrounds, runaways, immigrants, women with no families to search for them. But there, on page 7 of Marcus's notes, was a photograph that made his heart stop. A grainy security camera image from 3 years ago. showed a young woman being escorted into the back entrance of an upscale Manhattan hotel. The image quality was poor, but the bone structure, the tilt of her head, the elegant profile, it could have been Lena. The timestamp showed the photo was taken just 2 weeks before Marcus died. Elliot stared at the screen, his mind racing. Was the woman sleeping in his bed a victim who'd somehow escaped? Or was she something far more dangerous, bait in a trap that had already cost his brother his life? When he returned to the kitchen, Lena was standing by the windows, still in the silver dress, looking out at the city below. The morning light made her seem almost ethereal, like she might disappear if he blinked. "I should go," she said without turning around. "Wait." The word came out sharper than he intended. "I mean stay for breakfast, please." She turned then, and he saw something flicker in her eyes. Fear. Recognition. "I can't." "Why not?" "Because this isn't real, Elliot. Whatever you think this is, whatever you think I am, it's not real." After Lena left, Elliot couldn't shake the image of those scars. He spent the next 3 days diving deeper into Marcus's files, cross-referencing police reports, missing persons cases, and the network of contacts his brother had built in law enforcement and social services. What he found chilled him to the bone. The trafficking ring Marcus had been investigating wasn't just about exploitation. It was about infiltration. The organization recruited women with specific skill sets and appearances, trained them to move in elite circles, and used them to gather intelligence on wealthy targets. Corporate secrets, political blackmail, financial manipulation, all of it facilitated by women who could disappear into high society like ghosts. Marcus's notes detailed how the ring worked: select vulnerable women, break them down through violence and psychological manipulation, then rebuild them as sophisticated assets. The scarring wasn't just cruelty, it was a marking system, a way to identify their property. But some of the women had escaped. Marcus had interviewed 3 survivors in the months before his death, and their stories painted a picture of an organization far more complex and dangerous than anyone had realized. The escaped women lived in constant fear, never knowing if their former captors would find them, never able to trust anyone completely. Elliot called in favors with private investigators, security experts, and even some contacts in federal law enforcement. Within 48 hours, he had a preliminary report on Lena Carter, if that was even her real name. The woman who'd spent the night in his penthouse was a ghost. No social media presence, number credit history, no employment records. She paid for everything in cash, moved apartments every 6 months, and had no close relationships. She worked as a freelance art consultant, specializing in private collections, which gave her access to wealthy clients' homes and personal information. It was the perfect cover for someone gathering intelligence. But then Elliot found something that changed everything. A medical record from Mount Sinai Hospital, dated 18 months ago. Lena Carter had been treated for severe malnutrition, infected wounds, and what the doctor's notes described as injuries consistent with prolonged captivity. She wasn't working for the trafficking ring, she was running from it. Elliot's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Stop looking for me. It's not safe." His hands shook as he typed back, "I know about the scars. I know about Marcus. We need to talk." The response came immediately. Pier 17, South Street, Seaport, midnight. "Come alone or I disappear forever." Elliot spent the rest of the evening preparing. He copied Marcus's files to multiple secure servers, left detailed instructions with his lawyer about what to do if something happened to him, and armed himself with the only weapon he trusted, the truth. As he drove through the empty streets toward the seaport, he thought about his brother. Marcus had died trying to expose this network, trying to save women like Lena. Now Elliot had a chance to finish what his brother started, but only if he could convince a traumatized woman to trust him with her life. The pier was deserted except for the sound of water lapping against the dock and the distant hum of late-night traffic. Lena emerged from the shadows wearing jeans and a dark jacket, looking nothing like the ethereal creature from the charity gala. This was her real self, wary, scarred, ready to run. "You shouldn't have come," she said. "Neither should you. But here we are." "Your brother died because of me," Lena said, the words cutting through the cold night air like a blade. Elliot stepped closer. But she held up a hand to stop him. Don't. Just listen. She told him everything. Her real name was Elena Vasquez, and she'd been 19 when they took her, a runaway from foster care, sleeping in shelters, vulnerable and alone, exactly what they looked for. The organization called itself Providence, and they promised her safety, education, a future. Instead, they gave her 3 years of hell. They train you to be perfect, she said, her voice hollow. Perfect manners, perfect conversation, perfect lies. You learn to move in their world, to make powerful men trust you, want you. And then you gather their secrets. The scars weren't just marking, they were punishment for every mistake, every moment of resistance, every time she tried to be human instead of property. But she'd learned to survive, to play their game while planning her escape. I got out 18 months ago during a transfer between safe houses. But getting out doesn't mean you're free. They don't just let you leave. Marcus had found her 3 years ago through his investigation. She'd been assigned to gather intelligence on him, to discover how much he knew about Providence. But instead of manipulating him, she'd found herself wanting to help him. He was trying to save women like her, trying to expose the truth. I started feeding him information, she continued. Real names, locations, how the organization worked. But someone found out. They killed him and made it look like an accident. And you've been running ever since. She nodded. I couldn't go to the police. Providence has people everywhere. Judges, prosecutors, federal agents. I couldn't trust anyone. But you're trusting me now. Because you're Marcus's brother. Because you have the same eyes when you talk about justice. She paused. And because I saw your company's security protocols. If anyone can protect the evidence and expose Providence, it's you. Elliot felt the weight of his brother's legacy settling on his shoulders. What do you need from me? Help me finish what Marcus started. I have names, locations, financial records, everything needed to bring them down. But I can't do it alone. And after, when Providence is exposed. For the first time since she'd started talking, Elena smiled. It was small and sad, but real. I don't know. I've been running for so long. I forgot what it feels like to imagine a future. I could help you remember. She studied his face in the moonlight. This isn't a fairy tale, Elliot. I'm not Cinderella, and you're not Prince Charming. I'm damaged goods with a target on my back, and you're about to become the most wanted man on Providence's list. I don't care about fairy tales, he said. I care about justice, and I care about you. You don't even know me. Then let me learn. Elena was quiet for a long moment, weighing his words against years of learned distrust. Finally, she reached into her jacket and pulled out a flash drive. Everything Marcus died for is on here. Financial records, client lists, safe house locations, the names of everyone in their organization. But once you take this, there's no going back. They'll come for both of us. Elliot took the drive without hesitation. Then we'd better make sure we destroy them first. 6 months later, Elliot stood in the federal courthouse in downtown Manhattan, watching as the last of Providence's leadership was led away in handcuffs. The investigation had been massive, spanning multiple states and involving dozens of federal agents. The evidence Elena had provided, combined with Marcus's research and Grayson Technologies' digital forensics capabilities, had unraveled the entire network. 23 women were rescued from various Providence operations. 47 men were arrested, including 2 federal judges, a state prosecutor, and a deputy police commissioner. The organization's financial assets, over $100 million, were seized and would be used to fund survivor rehabilitation programs. Elena sat beside him in the gallery, no longer the ethereal woman in silver or the scared survivor on the pier. She'd spent months working with federal prosecutors, providing testimony that helped convict the people who'd destroyed her life. The process had been brutal, reliving trauma, facing her former captors in court, enduring cross-examination from defense attorneys who tried to paint her as an unreliable witness. But she'd survived it all, and in doing so, she'd found something she thought she'd lost forever. Her voice. It's over, Elliot said as they walked down the courthouse steps into the afternoon sunlight. This part is, Elena agreed. But Providence was just one network. There are others. Are you planning to go after them too? She smiled, the first genuinely happy expression he'd seen from her. We are, if you're willing. over the past 6 months as they'd worked together to build the case against Providence. Something had grown between them, not the fairy tale romance of their first night, but something deeper and more real. Trust built through shared danger, respect earned through courage, and love that had nothing to do with silver dresses or penthouse views. Elena had moved into a secure apartment that Grayson Technologies provided, started therapy to deal with her trauma, and began working as a consultant for the FBI's Human Trafficking Task Force. She'd found purpose in using her knowledge to help other survivors and bring down the organizations that had victimized them. Elliot had discovered that building walls wasn't enough. Sometimes you had to tear down the ones that trapped innocent people. "I've been thinking," Elena said as they reached his car, "about what you said that first night, about building walls. What about it? Maybe that's what we do together. You build walls to protect people, and I tear down the ones that imprison them. Sounds like a partnership. Is that what this is?" she asked, and there was something vulnerable in her voice despite all her newfound strength. "It's whatever you want it to be," he said, "but I hope it's everything." Elena Carter, who had been Elena Vasquez, who had been dozens of false identities, who had been property number 47 in Providence's files, finally knew who she wanted to be. She was a survivor, a fighter, a woman who had found her prince not in a ballroom but in a battle for justice. As they drove through Manhattan's busy streets, past the plaza where they'd first met, past the pier where she'd entrusted him with her truth, Elena thought about fairy tales and happy endings. Maybe she wasn't Cinderella after all. Maybe she was something better, a woman who had saved herself and found love along the way. The silver dress was long gone, donated to charity months ago, but the scars on her feet remained, and now she wore them differently, not as marks of shame, but as proof of survival, evidence of strength, reminders of how far she'd come. A question for you. After reading Elena's journey from victim to survivor to fighter for justice, do you believe that some scars can become sources of strength rather than symbols of trauma? In a world where survivors of trafficking and abuse often struggle to rebuild their lives and trust again, what role should society play in supporting their healing while respecting their agency to define their own recovery?